first thing you see when you walk through the front doors of WHS?
I either see a big crowd of people who are talking and stuff, or I see barely anyone, only people who are there for study hall, and I get the sinking feeling, oh crap, I'm late. I see some people who are already studying and already right to work in their study hall.
Someone says test or school, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I don't think I'm supposed to say that on camera. So when someone just says tests, that means, oh, I have to stay up late tonight because I have a test tomorrow and I need to study and I need to do well.
It's definitely something we struggle with. How do we get kids where they need to be? How do we continue their passion and their excitement for learning? We're asking kids to take high-stakes tests starting in 3rd grade. So by the time they become high school students, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, they already know where they stand and where their ranking is. As I often say, childhood is fleeting, and I call childhood all the way to 18.
You can definitely tell the students who are overly anxious and working really hard. And so, yeah, we can see that in our students, and it does make us concerned.
Well, I don't necessarily think that there are any problems in the way that students are being motivated. I think it's the way that they motivate themselves.
I think that there's a lot of emphasis placed on grades. I think part of what happens here at a high-performing high school like Winchester High School is that we're part of a larger system that emphasizes student achievement, and there's competition to be able to go to some of the highest performing schools in the country. So I think that sometimes what happens here is just kind of a microcosm of what's been going on around the country. So
kids think that the parents are being too hard on their kids, but they need to understand that the parents always want to push their kids to live up to their maximum potential. Parents completely know and understand their kids' passion, but grades at this stage is equally important as their passion.
I don't necessarily think that the way that the curriculum is structured here is the cause of the grade motivation problem. So yeah, I guess at face value, there's probably a problem. I don't know what the solution is, but...
I think that a lot of it makes it seem like school is a competition, and you always want to be in the highest classes with the best grades, and I don't think it should be like that. I think it should be more about the learning, and a lot of it's you study for something, you get that information for that day, and then you kind of just forget it, and there's really no retention of that information. It doesn't help you for the rest of your life.
We have an excellent education system. I think they're learning a lot, but their motivation isn't necessarily to learn more, but to get a good grade.
Education is kind of straying from being about learning and choosing what you want to learn and kind of learning about things that interest you and finding what interests you, and it's more about memorizing things to get a good grade on a test, to go to a good college, to have a good job. Everybody feels pushed to follow a certain path from a really young age.
Would you agree with the statement that there's a case of hypercompetition in WHS?
Hypercompetition? I don't think I would agree with that statement. I think there is a sense of competition, not between students as much as with yourself, and that does sound cliche, but I definitely have a sense of competition with myself that I need to be doing something that I'm capable of doing.
I remember when I came back from South Africa, my friends were telling me about their recommendation letters. They had to get recommendation letters from their teachers, and the process by which they got these recommendation letters was so competitive. People would have to come into school at 5 a.m. just to wait in line so that they could have a chance to get a spot to get a recommendation letter.
I guess one of the most important things is that teachers seem to place a huge importance on tests And even though they may offer other type of assignments, they aren't valued nearly as much as tests are.
It might just because for me, I haven't experienced as many difficulties in the education system. I think for me, it's been generally a pretty easy ride. I've definitely worked very, very hard to get to where I am and to get to where I want to be, but I haven't had any major difficulties with the system.
I asked my oldest son this morning at the breakfast table when I was looking at the questions, if WHS got rid of grades, and the only requirement was that you had to show up every day, I said, what percentage of students do you think would come to school having done the required reading and the required homework exercises and be prepared to actively participate in class? And he thought about it and he said 10%. And then he thought again, he said maybe less. And I said, well, in your experience, because my younger son wasn't there, so I had asked my older son, in your experience when you were going to school every day, what percentage of the class would you say, did the required readings, did the homework exercises, and actively participated? And he said between 80 to 90. So it goes back to the whole grade thing, that grades do serve a purpose, but we don't necessarily all have to be getting A's.
We live in Winchester. Education is important in Winchester. It's important for where you want to be in the future. And so I don't think that's a bad thing, necessarily. Everything in moderation.
We moved here like so many other people did, specifically for the schools. That's why we left the town we were in. We were in a town that had medium-level schools, and we wanted top-level schools. So that's why we're here. But I really didn't fully understand what we were getting ourselves into. And so in some ways, I might have to say that the cons outweigh the pros. I think there are more effective ways to get to the goal than the way it's happening here, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, Winchester's a blue ribbon school, and what else can you expect from a blue ribbon school than a lot of kids just being competitive in the grades that they want? Like, I feel like even probably the lowest level class, they probably, I don't know. But they might also they don't necessarily want C's or they'd like more A's. And I guess, I don't even know where I guess it's like parents' mentality, because I don't ever think we were actually taught that an A was good. Well, obviously an A is good, but A is the only thing that you can get, and a B is bad and a C is. Or it's TV, it's the internet, we're corrupted.
You look in the student handbook and it technically says that C is an average grade. That's average, B is better than average, and A is excelling or something. But it's here, that doesn't really apply.
No, I think it's different in every high school. I think it's different based on the people, based on the parents, based on the teachers, and I think unfortunately, well not unfortunately, but interestingly, every high school is its own case. Here in Winchester, they have made a lot, they don't announce valedictorian at your graduation. They don't release GPA rankings. They only release deciles. So they've made their own small attempts to try to prevent that unhealthy competition that exists in a lot of other towns. Because we are a very competitive town, and we are very, we have a solid academic standing.
I think that since Winchester High School is kind of seen as a higher up school, and a lower grade here is a higher grade somewhere else, that's kind of, it pushes a lot of its students really far and maybe past what they should be expected to do.
In terms of the high expectations thing, I struggle with that in terms of wanting to be sympathetic, but at the same time, you guys are getting this unbelievable education that 100 years ago would have been a privilege for just a few. And now it seems to be becoming a burden. Because I see the pressure that you guys are living under, but I do think that the students in the school have to take ownership of that.
Kind of I need to shut out my social life in order to have academic success, and I think that's kind of wrong.
You feel the need to work well because you're well, this is a good school system, I should be getting good grades. So even if the teachers or the school isn't up to par, the students make up for it. The reason Winchester is ranked so high is because the students work so hard, not because we have good teachers necessarily.
I feel like there's a lot of pressure to be perfect, And perfect is, you get your good grades, you have lots of volunteer hours, you have your friends, you have sports, you have so many things that you need to juggle to be perfect.
But I can tell you, as somebody who's been in the field for 28 years, I've spent my lifetime talking about these issues, about childhood being fleeting, about, cherishing the moments, about respecting the journey. And I agree, it starts at times in kindergarten or preschool even, where parents are wanting to know where they rank with their classmates.
Frankly, if the town, if we started to scale things back and slow things down, do a little less, assign a little less work, that's going to change the type of education that students get here. So do I think there's probably a way to get the same results with some modifications to the way we do things? Sure, and we're doing that.
I think I would rather be living in a place where there is emphasis on education than in a place where education is just, it doesn't matter. So
a lot of my friends sleep an average of 2 to 4 hours a night, and I know that I can't do that to myself and still enjoy my life. And so, but sometimes they're getting better grades than me, and that stresses me out. Like, should I be putting so much pressure on myself that I don't sleep at all? Do I need to be doing more than I'm doing so I can get that A instead of an A-?
I think the bar keeps getting higher and higher, but I think it's a bar that is going nowhere. I don't think the bar is going anywhere. I think people keep building themselves up for a future that doesn't really, where are we going with our future? Where are we going with training all these people to act in this certain way and to know this stuff? Where is this going to take us as a whole generation, as the current humans alive? Where are we going to go with our knowledge that we have?
Well, the Winchester High School has very high standards, and it's intimidating to meet up to them right now as a freshman. It's a little scary to think I should be doing this kind of work and be top of the class and all of that, but I'm not. And it's hard to balance, the curricular, the extracurricular, and all of the, it's hard to maintain the balance, I guess.
I think there's far too much homework, and I don't quite understand why, which is to say that study after study shows that there is no relationship between a heavy homework load and successful outcomes, successful grades. And in fact, a lot of the research shows quite the opposite, that the more heavily burdened kids are with homework, the worse they do. So I really think there's way too much homework, and that the kids would be more relaxed, would have a more positive attitude towards school, and be more awake and alert in class, and more able to learn if they weren't so burdened with so much homework.
I just saw something recently that said starting in kindergarten, it should be 10 minutes a night of homework and increase 10 minutes every year. So then by the time they're in high school, it's 2 hours. Our kids have, seems like, more than 2 hours of homework.
So my 23-year-old, when she went to kindergarten that many years ago, the expectation was not learning to read in kindergarten. By the time her younger sister started kindergarten 3 years later, they were expecting early reading kindergarten skills. And when my son, who's 5 years younger than the second one, so in the course of 8.5 years, they were expecting full reading in kindergarten. So in 8 years, we went from an environment where 5-year-olds were learning letters and pre-reading skills. We went to an environment where they were learning basic reading skills like sight words and early reading, to expecting students to read at what is called a C or D level, which is basically almost at a Dr. Seuss level book. It's just, as an early childhood expert myself, that's what my graduate degree work is in. It's astounding to me. So that's what we're expecting in kindergarten. So of course the stakes have gotten risen. Some of the stuff I see that goes on in this high school, frankly, I was doing on par work in college.
There's a lot of missed opportunities because of homework or not being able to fit things into my schedule. on top of homework, so.
I definitely see with my friends who will be like, oh yeah, after this I have to go to a club that lasts 3 hours and then go to an event that lasts another 2, and then I have like a piano lesson, so I'm not really getting home until like 8. And all I can think is, how do you do that? I mean, I know people who take like as many AP and honors classes as they can and do a lot of extracurriculars, and they barely have any time to sleep, let alone eat or relax or have time with their friends.
You know, that's why even as an early childhood person, I'm a big advocate of recess. You know, I'd rather see an academic block cut and not recess, because that's important too. How many high school kids get recess? And I'm not talking about recess like run outside and play on the monkey bars. I'm talking about a time where you say, I'm just going to unplug. I'm not going to worry about school for today or for night or to now. And I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to be a kid.
I mean, the things that my parents did, like no TV on the weeknights, and I had a bedtime until I graduated from high school. I had a bedtime. If homework wasn't done, it wasn't done. And of course, in the moment, I was like, my parents are Puritans, you know. We might as well be Amish. And then now I look back on it and think, thank you, you're so smart. That was the smartest thing you could possibly have done, because I slept, which means I learned better, which means I didn't have to study as much. I didn't have to do as much homework, and there was nothing to distract me from getting it done. I sat at the dining room table while my dad listened to classical music and did his work in the other room, and my mom puttered around, and that was what we did every night. And when my homework was done, I went to bed.
Teachers my age and those who grew up kind of outside of the Facebook, social media generation, is that you could, if you didn't like school or you had problems with people at school, at 2:15 or 2:30 you could get away from them, and you could get away from school, and you could kind of go be your own person and go do your own thing, maybe get into your neighborhood with your friends and be with them. But with the 24/7 social media connections, you can't escape that. And so those pressures that are there are always going to be there, and I think that plays a lot into then how people have their experiences here in the building and how they measure themselves.
So I'm sure you know that if you take an exam that you felt that you didn't really do very well on, you come home, you're kind of sad, you're demotivated, you're like, I studied for this, why didn't I do better? And then as if those bad feelings weren't enough, you barely have time to recover, and boom, that headline email is there, and you know how you did. So there's sort of no breathing time. I think that puts a tremendous amount of stress on kids.
Winchester's really fortunate in that we're developing a lot of uses for technology, but I'm not quite sure if we're getting that technology into the hands of all the kids, not just in special education, but across the board. In order for kids to be successful when they get out of here, whether it's work or a college situation, they really need to know how to problem solve. And I don't know how they can do that without being taught how to use the technology, or more importantly, having the skills to figure out how to use things.
So then the equation you're talking about is wavelength equals B over F.
Yeah, so you're just replacing C with B. And you're going to find B through the index of refraction, which you also get.
If it's so hard to get an A, why is an A considered to be an average grade?
I can tell that that's the perception from students, but I don't think they're getting it from teachers. I mean, I've never said a single thing to any student in 11 years that would indicate that I think a B is bad. So I don't know where that comes from.
A lot of my classes have like those top students, and then like people, they're always like, oh, I got a 96, like I'm so mad at myself, and I'm like, I got an 80, I'm happy. And like they just get so bummed by the tiniest mistake, and I'm like, try to be happy for myself, like when everyone else gets a good grade and I don't.
Like, I remember still in 9th grade in geometry, there were a bunch of kids, they were all freaking out because they didn't get the 100 on the test like they usually do. They got a 98. And there was a group of them, there was like 2 or 3, where most people, when they get a 60, they would react like this, but instead they got a 98. And there was a whole crowd of everyone else who were very frustrated by this, and they were kind of, they were like, why are you complaining? It's still a good grade, it's not gonna hurt you. very much, but they didn't really see that because they're so focused on everything has to be perfect and I need to be the best, and if I'm not perfect, then I'm not the best. So
my mother is constantly telling me when I go home that she was valedictorian and my dad was second in his class, and they expect me to be, they're holding me to the same expectations that they held themselves to. So it's a lot of my parents, but it's also a lot of me because I don't like to lose.
I say people, they want to be the best in everything. They want to be amazing at sports and also be like the, valedictorian-ish or like somewhere in that range.
It's really a bit scary to see how much pressure people put themselves under just for a slightly better grade.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a friend who's generally, everybody thinks of her as the nicest, a really, really nice person. And I do too. I think she's a great person, but she's also been driven to the point that she felt like she needed to cheat, and she also cheated on stuff. And I'm not gonna say anything about who it is. But it's also like, I think, a lack of confidence and insecurity.
I think students who don't have that competitive drive to be the best don't feel like can feel like they're not smart because of the way that the system frames it. You're smart if you get good grades on tests. You're not if you don't. And that's a really harmful system. It can affect students' mental health, physical health, everything, just by putting so much pressure on them that they don't know what to do.
The thing is, I'll feel really underprepared, and so I'll say those things like, oh, I'm like freaking out, like I don't think I'm really prepared for this, but then I'll go into the test and I'll get a decent grade, and then I'll have friends who are like freaking out just as much as me and everything and feel like they study just as much as me, and then they get a lower grade, and then they'll kind of be like mad that I got a better grade than them, and then I always feel bad that I got a better grade, even though like beforehand I was saying I'm so underprepared, I like am not going to get a grade.
Because there's such an attitude of, oh, how'd you do on this test? How'd you do? And that as you kind of creates the same mindset of like, oh, this person did the best, this person did the worst.
My belief is that most people are capable if they apply themselves. There are some people who have maybe a learning issue or another problem or a family difficulty that impacts their ability to learn and focus, but for less academically performing students, I think the resources available and the use of those resources and even more important, overcoming those challenges shows them what they can accomplish. And I do see Winchester High School as being that kind of a support environment to bring out the full potential in students.
I feel motivated when I see other people do really well. I'm actually really happy whenever they do really well because it just shows how much better everybody that I know around me, friends, are doing. Let's say if I do badly on a test, of course I'm going to feel very bad, and all my friends are going to help me. They're going to help me make a study guide next time, change my studying habits maybe. It's a really good community that we have here. It's not like overly competitive in the way that others doing badly will benefit ourselves or others doing good would hurt us.
But one thing that I'm really dreading this year would be awards nights, because if you get invited and you get one award and you see all these other people go up and get all these other awards on how smart they are, and you're just like that's great for them, and you're just here like, oh, yay. it's just hard, but it's at the same time you should be like happy for them because they got all this recognition, and it's just. But at the same time, on the inside, I feel like you're just feeling kind of like I could have tried harder, you know. But why I'm really dreading awards night is my dad presents the Princeton Award because he went to Princeton, and he's an alum, so he hands it out. But the thing is, he hands it out to like the person with the third highest GPA. And for the past 2 years, I've known who those people are. And this year, I know it's not going to be me. It's just going to be like kind of weird to see my dad giving an award for his college, who he's very proud of his college, and he loves Princeton with like every bone in his body. And it's like not going to be me. It's going to be one of my peers who I know is doing fabulous in school, and yes, I will be envious of how good they're doing, but at the same time, they're probably working harder than I am in school and in their academics. So I shouldn't be like, I don't know, that envious. I mean, I can't be envious and jealous, but at the same time, like, it's good for them because I know that I didn't do the work that they did to deserve it.
So this is a painting I did a few weeks ago, and the theme was where I wish I was. And I wish I was in the islands right now, or traveling somewhere far off.
I do think that there, at one time, there was a different emphasis placed on curiosity for a lot of the students, and now students are a little more motivated by the performance on the test and what the grade is there, instead of just taking a kind of longer view.
I really try to emphasize the learning with my students, but it's hard. I mean, the grade grubbing is a huge problem, but it doesn't bother me. Like, it bothers me philosophically because I would like to continue to cultivate an environment where students are happy to learn. But at the same time, I'm not going to try to convince a bunch of teenagers to stop grade grubbing. That's what you're supposed to do. I mean, you're supposed to be in this kind of like myopic moment of your lives where everything is about this fixation on success. I mean, that's how I was. Didn't always work, but you know, it falls apart in different ways as you get older and you learn what you're good at, and you know, you either accept the feedback or you don't.
I definitely think that the learning process is pretty much unimportant to a lot of people. It's basically you work to get this final product to be the best you can, but it doesn't matter if you actually learn or if you really understand like what you're writing down or anything. It's just to make a product that shows the teacher that like you can produce something that will get you a good grade.
I know that in a lot of classes now, like a common question that is asked is like, will this be on the test, rather than like, could you explain this to me? I think there's just like, people aren't really in it for the learning anymore.
So yeah, people are like pre-programmed to think, even if it's a teacher telling a personal anecdote about their life, they're thinking, okay, so now question 47 on the test is going to be, and how old was I when I went to law school?
I think people come to school to just get by, to get that A, and to like go off into college so that they can go into their jobs, so that they can go get married and like follow this set paved path that's out in front of us. I don't think people are going to school, or most people aren't going to school because they really care. I think most people are going to school just to meet the expectations that are set on them, and not because they really value the art of learning.
In school, it's like you go to English class, and for an hour and 7 minutes you're analyzing text and trying to figure out what the author's saying, and then the bell rings and you have 5 minutes to just go to your next class, and then all of a sudden you're trying to prove theorems and use complex equations, and then all of a sudden the bell rings and you have to go back to history, and the subjects just get mushed together.
People don't really remember that much. Maybe they remember the things that were stressed, which is fine, but wouldn't you rather really learn things and actually figure out what you like instead of just dreading a class because it's a lot of work?
They could do better in terms of bringing students to their passions. And in that sense, I don't really feel like Winchester High School played that big of a role in terms of my experiences. It did play a role which kind of supported me once I found said passion, but in terms of guiding me to it, I can't say it did much. So in that sense, it wasn't either positive or negative. It's just kind of lacking in that sense.
I would hope as a district that we would, in a school, we would try to shy away from too much standardization, because I think that takes away some of the uniqueness that the class can have based on the teacher, their understanding of the content, their passions, and the passions and the interests and desires of the students who may come into that with some much different interests and much different and different skills.
The setup for having rows in classrooms is like it's from like the Industrial Revolution, so you could get used to working in a line. You know, hopefully we're not preparing. You know, there's not very many mills around here for you to go work in.
But you know, I would venture to say that it's a pretty small percentage of the total that really come out of this environment feeling like, you know, they nailed it.
I think there's always something that you can do, and I think that's what drives you as a human being, that you're going, because if you're content, then what are you going to do? Like, that's so boring.
There are some, not some. Most of the teachers that my daughter had were outstanding. Not good, outstanding. She had fantastic teachers. And I expect that my son hopefully will be lucky and have the same. So it's not that the teachers aren't good, it's just that the kids are struggling too much. Struggling too much to really enjoy and really engage a lot of the time.
Have you ever had any sleepless nights before?
I have probably had somewhere between 20 to 40 sleepless nights over the course of the past 2 years.
I probably get about, I would say, an average, probably like 3 to 4. And I mean, it varies depending on, like in the fall, I get a lot more sleep, like I average around like 5 or 6, but then once I get a continue in the year, and especially in the spring, sometimes that number drops down to like 2 or 3. So it depends on like kind of what point in the year you are, but I would say our average probably 3 or 4.
Well, I'm a little less crazy than him. So like in 9th and 10th grade, I used to like at least average 5 or 6 hours a day. And then junior year, I think first semester was probably like 4 hours a day, 4 to 5. And then second semester with like midterms and then, midterms and then APs, I started going to 3 hours a day, and then like towards the end of the year, it was 2 hours a day. But that's not literally just 2 hours of sleep. Like it would be 2 hours of sleep at night, early morning, and then you go to school, and I come back from extracurriculars, and then I would take a nap for maybe 2 more hours, because it's unsustainable because all the work. But then after the nap, it would be like 2 a.m. and then I have to do my homework, and then it's all of like a cycle. He's doing it as a freshman and a sophomore, and it's definitely not healthy, but like at what point can you tell yourself like I'm gonna stop all my extracurriculars, or I'm just gonna stop doing this and then that, and then like a lot of the times I stay up late or something, it's because, or I overwork myself, it's because I keep telling myself that like if I work a little harder, if I put a little bit more time on it, then I'll get a better result.
I've definitely felt very like overstressed from grades a lot. Like I'll be working on an essay or a project like the night before it's due, and I'll just kind of have to stop and be like, this is a lot to take in, and I really just want to do it the best I can, and I'll get really overwhelmed and kind of have to take like 10 or 15 minutes just to be like, this doesn't count for like the rest of my life, it's just one grade, it's just like one thing in the long run.
My friend had a mental breakdown this year, sort of after there was like bad news involved, and she just kind of cried for a while, and she kept on going on about how her life was just nothing except for school, and how she felt that it just wasn't right.
When I'm at the elementary school and I'm finding 3rd and 4th graders that are, pulling their hair, and that's a typical stressor of a young child, there's something wrong. We need to figure out where we're failing our kids and why this increased stress and anxiety even at younger ages. So then we're full blown at the high school, and literally we have a lot of children who are hospitalized for this.
Okay, say we were to have a hypothetical problem, who do we turn to? I feel like, okay, the first person you might turn to is a friend. After that, maybe a parent. After that, maybe a teacher. But like in the hierarchy of the people you would look to seek help for, maybe your teacher is trained, like, or even certified to some way of helping you, but you just don't know that.
I can tell when the administration cares about those things, and they're like, okay, we're going to have an assembly, or we're going to spend a WAG block like talking about balancing out stress levels and things like that. But it doesn't extend to anything beyond that. It's like a surface concern.
When I go in the main office and sign in, I see right next to the sign-in desk the mission statement for the school. It talks about the school's goal being to produce students who are strong critical thinkers with strong, evaluation, writing skills. That's all good stuff. Those are important skills you need for college and for the job market and for life. But there was nothing in the mission statement at all that talked about producing people who are healthy, happy, well-rounded individuals.
And the memory, I'll share you a story. It was freshman year, and it was finals week. And there was one class that I felt extremely underprepared for. It was actually a series of classes. I was prepared for them, but this was back in the day where I would over-prepare for things. I would work myself into literal sickness. So I had spent the week cramming and sitting down at my desk, not eating, not sleeping, just absorbing the knowledge, cramming it all into my brain. And a day before the finals started, I got sick. I got really sick. I would have flu-like symptoms. I was kind of feverish. I was not thinking straight. And so I took my phone because I was so stressed out. And I looked at it and it was out of battery. And I thought, oh my God, my phone's almost out of battery. I need to charge it. How does one charge things with electrical currents? And then conveniently I was near the microwave, so I thought, would a microwave charge my phone? So I put my phone in the microwave to charge it. And I broke it. I broke my phone because I was so stressed out about finals that I actually became delusional. After that I knew there was a problem. But yeah, I have overworked myself into literal delusion and sickness for grades. Not worth it. Not worth a phone. Are you impressed, Gru? When anyone is pushed to their breaking point, they will crack. See, the school, the system, it is scary if you think about it. It's actually very scary.
I am visiting colleges actually this April break, so my parents are really ahead of the game. So I have thought about my GPA, but not as much as I probably should. But yeah, I've definitely thought about it.
I think I would always tell myself if I get good grades, you don't have to worry about your GPA. So I never look at it as this one number that defines who you are in high school until college apps rolled around. That's when I was like, oh wow, you can summarize my entire transcript, my, slugging away at A push, cruising through other classes. They all just get averaged out and then it's one number.
The more obsessed you've become over something, it's like an unhealthy addiction. If you just obsess over something so much, it's going to eat away at you and you're not going to be able to actually focus on what's important.
The agenda planner, it has the GPA markings for all of your subjects, and people are really obsessive. They'll calculate at the end of each quarter and take an average to calculate their average GPA just before the guidance counselor does it because they really have to know it.
I wouldn't say that I was super worried about the numbers. It's not like I took a calculator and I was like, okay, if I get this and this and this, I'll be like this around. But it's definitely once they make you aware of it, then you start to think okay, where do I rank according to the colleges I'm looking at.
My experience was completely different. I think I calculated my GPA in after first semester in freshman year. I think it's because the people in my class are I guess they're more competitive than Ashley's, at least from Ashley's description of them. I think in freshman year, we started comparing GPAs, calculating GPAs. It's kind of just a thing where I didn't really know what it was until end of semester one in freshman year. But then everyone started being like, oh, what's your GPA? What's yours? Oh, do you hear he got this GPA? I kind of do. I calculate it like every time quarter grades come out, just because to keep like a tab on. Because I think I view GPA as kind of like a summary of your academic achievements.
I had some friends who were kind of like asking around, being like, oh, so like what do you think your GPA is, like where do you think you're at, kind of, and I knew some people who were almost kind of like ranking people by their GPA, and that's kind of like a product of like kind of like the hyper competitive atmosphere that we're in, because they're trying to see like, oh, like who's at the top and like who's kind of like a little less than them and who's kind of like towards the bottom. Even though school doesn't do the rankings anymore, I think it's a lot more internalized, where the kids are trying to just rank everyone else and do better in like their own rankings.
So it might be just the people I surround myself with, but like we normally, it's like the focus of our discussions in the cafeteria a lot of times are like who got what on what test.
How many AP classes do you guys currently take?
Class is 3, but econ has 2 exams, so I don't know if that counts.
Classes this year I only take 2, but I'm taking 8 additional ones self-studied for the actual test. Yeah. So
okay, we already have a fracture.
Okay, so the reason why I take so many APs this year. Okay, so my sister, first of all, I come from a very a family that expects a lot. My sister is pretty well known in this school. She goes to Harvard University, but my parents went to Harvard, so
oh boy.
Lots of expectations.
The lineage.
On me. Exactly. So everyone in my nuclear family is Harvard bred, so they have Harvard values, which means that if you can do something, you should do it. It's I don't want to say something like it's a responsibility, it's a duty to take this AP test, but if it's possible that you can learn more, if you can just strive to take another test, like learn that subject, like maybe you didn't know whether or not you wanted to learn psychology, but then you take the AP test, you're like, whoa, I actually know a good amount and I do like it. Maybe I want to take AP bio or something like that. So the AP tests are generous with their scoring, so even if you don't do like really well, you can still get a generally good score on it.
One of the things that I feel could do something to minimize maybe an emphasis on grades would be, and students taking courses that based on things that they're interested in, would be to eliminate weighted grades. That doesn't receive a lot of support necessarily from some parts of the school, but I do think that, just from my take, that if grades carried the same weight, whether it was an AP class or a college prep class, that students wouldn't have that extra incentive perhaps to take an honors class or an AP class in a subject that they may not be interested in simply because of the effect that it would have on their GPA. This is my 17th year at the high school. The weighting has always been, the weighting's been here for all 17 years, so my fight to try and have any effect on changing the weighting has not done anything. It's me continually bringing it up as a cause of at least my own personal concern.
Because I've had a lot of times where I want to take some classes, but because they're not AP or they're not honors, I can't really fit that into my schedule because I need to jam more APs into that schedule instead.
I don't see the point in taking classes that you're not interested in unless you're required to take them. But if you get a choice, why would you choose something that you're not going to be unhappy with? It's like if you're going for a snack and you see like Brussels sprouts. If you hate Brussels sprouts but you love cake, you see Brussels sprouts and cake there, are you really going to take the Brussels sprouts or are you going to take the cake? Because I'm going to take the cake, so.
I mean, in all honesty, like this thing with the AP scores, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it kind of I would say encourages mediocrity because you would say like, okay, how much do I need for a 4 or a 5? That's all I need to like place out of a class. And then you learn about the curve, which is like a 60% or 70%. So then like it's still so much about the test.
I enjoyed the 3 different AP sections that I've taught. I've enjoyed the students that were in the class. I think what I've always felt is that guilty is not the right word, but I mean, I felt that because there is such a demand to prepare students for a standard assessment, that they're going to have to take and you want them to be able to be successful on, because that's going to be one measure of their success in that class, that sometimes you don't actually have the opportunity in an AP class to have rich discussions or debates or presentations, because there's such an emphasis on content coverage that some of the skill development or some of just the content exploration gets lost, because sometimes it can feel like it's such a race to get there.
Personally, I feel it's not only solely for college. Plus, you don't have a place where you put your AP exams for college, so it doesn't even matter.
Like supplementals, you can put it there.
He's done more research than I have.
Conversely, I've heard from members of the guidance department that have said that colleges kind of will take the courses that you did and the grades that you got in those courses, and will do kind of calculate them based on their own system, as opposed to using the GPA that the school has assigned to those grades.
I think they're saying that if the AP class is necessary to get into a college, because that's what people, like, they're saying now. Like, people are just taking the AP just so they can get into a good college.
Once you're in high school, grades actually matter. Colleges see them. It's not like middle school where I felt like my grades mattered, but in the grand scheme of things, they didn't really. And then everything started to matter and became a little more nerve-wracking. It seemed like one bad grade could be like could have a negative impact on the rest of my life.
I think high school should be preparation for college, but I think people see high school as the stepping stone to college and not significant in its own sense.
I don't think there are any kids at Winchester High, even if they're not overly competitive, that aren't going to feel well prepared. They're going to get to college, they're going to know how to write a paper, they're going to have the skills that they need to be successful, which is awesome. And it's a tribute, frankly, to them and to their families, and certainly to our talented staff.
More people in the country are aware about what the choices are. If you go back 20 years, and this has been a gradual thing really for the past 30 and 40 years, but over these past 30 years, a larger and larger percentage of the country has parents who went to college. Students had parents who went to college, then didn't. That change, combined with our overall awareness on the internet and our understandable obsession with what's best, and I, as a parent, wanting what's best for my student, my child, makes awareness of what the, quote, best schools are to go to, and you have a disproportionate number, ever-growing proportional number of people who want to go where it's best. That puts more pressure on those institutions. They have no choice. They're not to be blamed for it. Why would they not accept whoever they believe is the best?
It used to be that if you had good grades and you got good test scores, you were able to go to a good school. Now, not even having good grades, a good test score will guarantee you a place at one of the best schools, or like the school you really want to go to. On top of having good grades and a good test score, you have to be participating in extracurricular activities. You need to show leadership. You have to do community service. You need to do something special to make you stand out, and all of these sort of things that people are always considering, like, oh my gosh, like, what have I done? Have I done this? Am I doing enough?
There's this club that's been existed for several years at the school, and end of last year, there were a couple of juniors, well now seniors, who were trying to create like a similar club in the school, and there was the club leader, the leader of the first club that existed, let's call it Club A, wanted to create the Club B that was a similar club, and he was working on it, but then another person from my grade kind of took over Club B, and they kind of got into a big fight about who would be the club leader for Club B. And well, to some extent, I guess they do want, they're passionate about this stuff, but to a large extent, I'm positive that it was about having the name club leader of this club on your resume. And I feel like these two people, they used to be friends, and their friends used to be friends with each other. And a lot of relationships were rocky during that point?
Well, at a certain point, it's unavoidable. I think the first time I realized this was once I entered junior year. If I tell people that I'm a junior, the first thing that they ask me is, oh, have you started looking into colleges yet? And in the beginning of the year, my answer was always no, I haven't. But just recently, just a couple of weeks ago, I went on my first college tours, and now it really feels like the process has started. Even midway through junior year, you feel like the college process has really almost begun.
I think all my teachers are starting to talk about colleges and those skills that you need. And I'm just trying to, not care about college this year, but that's not probably going to happen.
You know, my son who's in college right now, he applied to 8 schools, which, might have been the norm, maybe on the low side. Now I hear of kids applying to 15, 20 schools. Well, that's crazy because there's no one who can identify 20 schools that they'd really like to go to, okay? They might be 20 fine schools, but they're not 20 schools that you'd really want to go to. So, why is someone applying to 20 schools?
All these colleges have that their standard grades, or what the students that they accept, what grades they have. That's when I really started focusing on what my grades were and am I good enough, and it really messes with your mind when you start asking that question, am I good enough?
I feel like getting into a good school is some form of validation that you are good enough, and I feel like everybody was just trying to reach that point of validation.
There are 3 stories. There are the kids who get into their dream college and say, yes, it was all worth it. There are the kids who don't necessarily get into their dream college and are pretty bitter about this whole process. Then there are the kids who don't necessarily get into their dream college, yet still make it out great in life, and they say, you know what, those are 4 years I'll never get back, but I have no regrets. So I think, unfortunately, there are basically 2/3 of the type of people who come out will be okay in the end. However, that is not to say there is not that 1/3 that would have tried really hard and will forever remain a little bitter.
If you look 20 years in the future, I think kids who grow up in an environment like this, they will be doing what they want to be doing with their lives. I think we definitely have the ability from this foundation that we're making right now. I think we have the ability to do whatever we want to do. There are so many possibilities.
I always tell my students about the D that I got in chemistry in college. A D, first semester of college. And I thought, I am a charlatan. Here I was, like a good student, A's and B's in high school. I get into this good school. I show up. I think that I got what it takes. And I get a D, I got a D. I thought I was gonna have to drop out. I thought my parents were gonna stop paying. And they wrote me this letter being like, you know what, we just think that you didn't work hard enough, which was true. But they also said, but also maybe chemistry isn't your thing. Which was also true. I liked chemistry in high school, but when it came time to bring it in a physical chemistry class at an Ivy League school, it wasn't gonna happen. And I had to just recognize that, accept it, pick myself up by the bootstraps and move on and figure out what I did want to do. And I'm not saying it didn't suck. I'm just saying, we've all been there. It's just kind of the nature of the beast. And I sometimes wish that students could see the blessing in the struggle.
I often tell people, and I say this publicly, I couldn't do a high school schedule. And this isn't a Winchester High schedule. This is any quality high school. Come to school early, hopefully be involved in something, go to classes all day, 67-minute periods. Let's just say I'm an honors kid, so I've overscheduled. Instead of taking 5 core classes, I'm taking 6 or 7. So I don't have a break, I just have a lunch. And then I go right from there to my afternoon activity, whatever that is. I get home for dinner at 6 o'clock. I eat dinner, maybe I shower. I go to my bedroom, and now I have 4, 5, 6 hours of homework. So I'm up till midnight, 1 o'clock, and then I start the whole process over again, and I'm up at 5:30, 6 o'clock. I couldn't do that schedule. I do that schedule some days, and frankly, the next day I'm exhausted.
I went to Winchester High School. I guess I won't share the year that I graduated. Even then, so it was a while ago, the emphasis was placed on grades as a measure of accomplishment. Even then, the school motivated students to grow in other ways through the arts and athletics. However, there was not the same awareness of or emphasis on the social development.
From a very young age, I've always been very studious. And I don't remember a time where I didn't care about school. I think I've always cared about school, and I think I've always worked hard in school.
I know people who don't necessarily care that much about their grades just because they were never forced into that mindset. And while people do want to do well, it's not like above all else.
Where people's parents come from definitely has a lot of effect on the pressure that is put on them to perform well in school.
I don't think if my parents pressured me more, I'd do any better, or it'd be any better for me. Oh, jeez. It'd be any better for me. But I think that the fact that they don't pressure me a lot just like drives myself to pressure myself more.
I have heard so much about parents who constantly badger their kids and will punish them if they get really bad grades. But I'm lucky, and I know I'm lucky, to have parents who are not as concerned with the physical manifestation of how hard you work or what it says on the report card.
Okay. Oh, have I ever fought with my parents? So yeah, my parents, like I say, can be pretty, what's the word I'm looking for, excessive as to how much stress they put onto me when grades come. There'll be times, especially around when quarter grades come out, when mid-year grades and final exam grades come out, they will just be harboring down on me like, what did you get? I need to know. And there have been plenty of times when they've just asked me again and again and again and again, and I have just snapped.
It was very stressful for our family when every Sunday night seemed to be an academic crisis. That put stress on the whole family.
So the irony in some of this is a lot of my friends I know feel a lot of pressure from their parents to perform well, and that is actually something that me and my friends use to bond with each other, just talking about who has the hardest parents and whose parents are the most stress-inducing.
So I think as an educator and as a parent, I always feel like people should work up to their potential. So if you have the potential to be, an honor student, why wouldn't you do that? But I guess I didn't realize what the toll on her. It was. She's a kid who wanted to sleep early. She was like, "Mom, I don't want to be up till 1 o'clock doing homework every night." So I, as a parent and as an educator, it was hard for me to say, "All right, you can drop down in these courses, even though you have the ability to do the work."
My mom was always, when I was in 6th grade, she was like, "What's your job this year?" And I said, "I don't know." She was like, "Your job is to get all A's and get into honors math." My job 7th grade was to get all A's and to get into honors science. And then my job 9th grade was my job 8th grade was to maintain all A's and get into honors English. And then 9th grade was to do my best and get into all the other honors classes that were not yet offered. So my mom was always big on doing well.
I think I'm learning as a parent, even with my 3rd son now who's in high school, we're learning to have those thoughtful conversations about where are your own passions, what is your ability, and where do you fit in on that.
We all almost have older siblings, so we all have seen, I guess, the the movement from high school to college, and I think we're trying to look up to them or try and follow in their footsteps.
I have a lot of times thought I need to live up to where my siblings are at, because one of my brothers is 9 years older than me, my sister's 6 years older than me, and my other brother's 3 years older than me. So I see all these achievements that they've gotten at the places where they are in their life, being 25 and stuff. And I feel like if I don't do well enough now, I'll never be able to get to those same achievements, and I kind of won't live up to the greatness that they've kind of set at that point.
Since I grew up in a family that had high expectations, I saw my sister go through high school right before I went in. She graduated the year that I was coming in. She graduated the year before I came in. So when she went off to Harvard as a freshman, I came here as a freshman. So I had expectations from how she conducted her studies and how she talked to her friends. And that just made me hyper-competitive my freshman year. I worked a little too hard. I didn't really concentrate on what was really important to me. I really didn't learn things because I wanted to. I just really wanted that good grade. So as I continued on sophomore year and finally junior year right now, I'm doing things because I really want to learn them.
It's not like I'm right behind in Ashley's shadow, but I feel like in terms of academic achievement and in terms of a lot of different things. I feel like I have a lot to live up to, or the standard is very high because people, because I think Ashley's done a lot in high school and achieved a lot, and so I feel like I have to set the goal pretty high to be able to follow up on that.
I want to always set a good example in terms of just doing my best, but again we are different in terms of interests, and we are different people. So growing up with him, our parents have always encouraged learning together. I don't feel any competition between us. It's always been very mutually supportive.
I've never really asked them kind of what they did at this point, because I kind of see where they are and what they're doing 9 years later, but it's I'm not 9 years older than I am now, so I shouldn't be expecting to be at that point. But I always kind of push myself to be that kind of content and organized and decisive kind of with my life.
I have a lot of fears for my younger sibling because I'm pretty sure it's bound to happen. He's going to be compared to me, whether it be by my parents or the teachers I have had in the past, whatever. And I fear that he'll have to go through the same experience that I have.
Parents are much more involved than they ever were when I went to high school, and it doesn't give kids enough breathing space to try and navigate their own way and to advocate for themselves, which are two important skills for life beyond high school.
I guess, but I think the most blame is on the teachers. They all have a part in the pressure and the competitiveness of the school, but I think the teachers have the most to blame for.
I don't really blame it on the school, because honestly, I would also I guess you could argue it's more the student body than the teachers, or if everyone in your class wants an A, then you're going to feel the need to get an A.
Oh, I think there's things in that all of us can do to make this a better environment. I think that being able to have, and I think one of the things too, like you'd said, teachers or students are kind of removed from the behind the scenes discussions or the after school discussions, and so I would say, I think that from a teacher perspective, then I would say that there's also kind of an administrative role in there too, in kind of creating an educational vision for both the district and for the school, and then helping to kind of put teachers in a position to be able to help implement that educational vision. I think that for you as a junior, to think about, if you look back on your high school experience, you are going to have had a high school experience that has had potentially four different principals over your 4 years here. And I think that that's very significant if you look back on what might be a turbulent 4 years, in that there hasn't been the consistent building leadership to help to provide an environment or atmosphere that would be important for then the teachers to be able to provide a consistent academic environment.
There's a sort of trickle-down effect from certain initiatives that have been in place for the last 10 years or so, starting with the Bush administration and, the kind of, and things like Race to the Top and those kind of initiatives. And President Obama in the last few years has just sort of doubled down on the tests that should be given. And so in the last few years, going to a Common Core has increased the number of tests that we're supposed to give here in Massachusetts.
4 years ago, the state's Department of Education rolled out a new teacher evaluation system, and it was different than ones that had been put out. It was different than the one that had been currently used. A greater emphasis on more frequent observations of teachers, teachers developing a portfolio.
People want to be able to walk in and say, I saw the person standing there and speaking, and the kids are taking notes, because that's what I'm comfortable, and that is easy for me to quantify. It's harder to quantify what a teacher is doing when it's student-driven learning, and the students are the ones doing the teaching and the talking.
There's also supposed to be, and it's still something that the state is working on developing, is that a teacher's rating would be connected to their impact on student learning. And there's some controversy on what defines impact on student learning, because some of it is based on growth measures as opposed to output and what they do just in a kind of an achievement level. So if you have students who are regularly scoring in a 90% range, they can only improve by another 10 percentage points, and so there's not that much growth. So if a teacher then does that mean a teacher would have a low impact on student learning because their students have only grown 10%, whereas maybe a teacher had students who on a particular assessment scored a 60, by the end they scored an 85, they've achieved by growing 25 percentage points, but it's still a lower achievement level than the teacher who had students achieving at a 90% at the beginning. So I think that's a part of the new evaluation system that the state is still working on, but as the state is still working on it, it leaves school districts across the state kind of, in a sense, a little bit in limbo as far as how we're supposed to implement that mandate.
On a personal level, I like teachers, and I mean, I know a lot who genuinely do care about teaching their students, and it's just a matter of the system preventing them from actually teaching their students and getting them to understand.
One of the things that's kind of ridiculous about the whole testing thing too is there's so much emphasis placed on gathering data. You have to have data for like what the students are doing, you have to have data for what teachers are doing and like how they feel their every minute and like what they're, and the thing that's kind of ridiculous on that is that what kind of data do you want exactly for thinking? The students are not as prepared with some actual problem solving. Once they, for example, get out of college, and if they don't have a lot of graduate school experience and they're entering the workforce, they're very good at like following directions and like sort of taking the test kind of thing. But when given a sort of more open-ended kind of challenge, then that's where you run into difficulty.
See, that's what I'm worried about. I'm worried that people will lose the ability to do things for themselves because we have technology that does things for us and we have other people that tell us what to do. Like, how do you decide what to do for yourself? Like, most people don't really know what they want to do with themselves.
I think they're going to get to college and they're going to be in for the shock of their life because they're going to realize that they're going to get bad grades. It's going to happen. Like, the classes are going to get a lot harder because you need to learn from your failures in order to get better. Otherwise, you just keep getting worse. I don't know. It's scary looking into the future, if that's the future.
With Winchester, similar to how every year the grades get bigger and bigger, I feel like every year is going to be the next most competitive year. I mean, first there's the legacy. There's, wow, the students before us did like this well. We want to do even more. Like, we want to set a new standard. And each year follows up on that. So it just gets more and more competitive.
But the cynical side of me thinks, well, if you shift to a different grading system, isn't that just going to then eventually kind of develop its own internal sense of what's valuable and what's not, right? I think we could change it to, stars and hearts and rainbows, and people are going to be like, oh, she got rainbows, I mean, it doesn't matter. But I would be open to experimenting with different ways to reduce the workload. But I just think the town, the state, people are going to have to change their expectations of the output then, and all agree that it's going to be about a depth of conversation as opposed to how many things you covered or how far you got in the vocab book or, what was the average AP test score. Teachers are naturally going to be on the defensive when they really believe in what they're doing, and then students don't always know how to give feedback in a way that's not emotional and not personal. But could it be an ongoing conversation of different ways to assess that? Sure.
It could, but that's such a huge question because if you want to be the leader in that, if Winchester want to be the leader in something like that, we do have to worry about how that's going to impact kids' options when they get out of high school and how other schools are going to view it. We have to be very clear with the schools that the kids apply to, what we're doing, how we're doing, and what their grades mean.
People really need to be focusing more on collaboration than competition, yet this, like, Winchester High School's kind of taught us to, like, attack our friends, try to do better than them, instead of, like, work together to be great.
Oh, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. So, we'll see.